Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Welcome to this edition of the Analyst Report Series. I'm joined by Craig Jeffery. We're going to talk today about the Treasury ecosystem. You know, Craig, I think about Treasury management systems, Treasury aggregators, folks that we've talked about in the prior podcasts. It makes me wonder, what really is a Treasury ecosystem? What defines it? Are these players up-and-comers? Are they niche and they focus on a key area that nobody else is? How do they fit into Treasury systems and providing support to Treasury teams to do the work they need to do?
Yeah, and I think, for those that download our annual Treasury Technology Analyst Report, there's quite a bit in there about that, but not all of it is covered, as you know, which is the source of your question. We have a single analyst report now. We used to have one on Treasury management systems. That was the longest running. We added Treasury aggregators, and then we did supply chain finance, and then we combined them. And in addition to supply chain finance, we put in cash conversion cycle solutions. So anybody in the AR and the AP side fit into those categories. We also opened up another category called Treasury ecosystem, and this is everything that's related in that space. To a certain extent, everybody's in the Treasury ecosystem. But if we haven't called out a specific category, we identified it. So firms like Boost and Clip Money, both in the payments business, one in cash deposits for local activity like Clip Money, or Boost facilitating both in-country and cross-border payments would be an example. Treasury Go is another one, who does a significant amount of activity with bank account management, foreign bank account reporting, BOI compliance, all of those activities. Treasury Go is another player, not really lined up as a treasury management system, but handling all of that activity. And so didn't fit super nicely into the other categories. And same thing with Trust Me. So security-related vendors, which is becoming increasingly important, fall into this category. They, some of them may have a tie into the, payment hub arena that would be part of Treasury aggregators. Others would fit and apply to an ERP, a treasury management system, or a Treasury aggregator. Any payment-oriented system could have the benefit of some of the security features. So this is kind of the broader catch-all about technology that many Treasury groups would care about.
So, Craig, you talked about some of the players in this Treasury ecosystem and some of the capabilities that they have. When I think about the fintechs in this area, is it that they are truly niche and they're filling a gap, a hole, and so they're a standalone product? Or are they really complementary to TMS, Treasury aggregator, or a company's ERP? And broadly thinking about that, it's, do they dovetail in, or are they potentially, some of these players in this arena, are they going to come in and compete directly with a TMS or an aggregator? How do you view that when it comes to the players that you just mentioned? And are there others that potentially are in that arena that are just starting out that could be players in the future?
Yeah, I like how you asked that question, or several of different questions. I would say they tend to have a very strong niche. They're very, very deep in a particular area. And so sometimes that can be, that's all somebody needs, is the real depth there. And other times they will, be complementary and connect to other systems, kind of the best of breed integrating. So those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. If you have very, very simple needs on bank account management, you don't necessarily need something that's really focused on bank account management, for example. But as it becomes more complex, then there's needs. Not everybody needs to have places to deposit cash across the country or across the U.S. or Canada. but some do. And so the ability to do that without necessarily going to a bunch of banks is very specialized. Well, you still need to have banks and you still need to have other technology tools. So the answer is it kind of depends, but generally it's specialized and it's complementary.
You talked about some of the capabilities that these folks have, but what are the issues that they're really trying to address? Is there demand out there by Treasury teams and treasurers that are saying, hey, we have a need here, and nobody's really filling that need? Or is it that they're hypothesizing that there is a gap, there is a need, and we can fill that or address that issue with our particular technology? What is it that's bringing them into this arena?
Yeah, and so I'll answer that in several different ways. So is there a need, for example, in the area of security and fraud detection, fraud management, fraud prevention? The threat has escalated rapidly. Most providers on the payment side or the treasury management system side are adding those capabilities. But there's also a number of specialists who are adding capabilities too. Because the threat is so high, there is a need for this rapid innovation and expansion. And so I would answer it that way, right? The people are addressing it, but the threat is so big. The answer needs to be multiple and many, and integration will certainly be a key there. Other examples are, how do you handle cash deposits? I mean, I don't have any cash on me right now. I don't carry cash, so to me it's a little bit abnormal. But a lot of people, throughout the country have cash and pay cash for certain things. All those retailers that are collecting cash need to have a place to deposit it. So people either running to the bank or they're going somewhere else to make those deposits, or having armored car pick things up. And so this is a solution where it's bank agnostic, right? You can take it to these different locations, deposit cash, and it gives you the information, gives you the ability to do that centrally without having to have, let's say, 10 or 20 or 30 banking relationships. You can still maintain your banking relationship and use the service to handle the cash deposit. So there's different ways these issues are being solved. Boost has other examples too, Treasury Go as well. These are solving challenging problems that are, escalating because of the threat, or it just becomes harder to solve because it becomes very complex. I need 10 banks or 30 banks or 40 banks to handle this particular situation.
You just hit on this idea of niche versus generalists. And when I think about the Treasury ecosystem players, and from a generalist perspective, are they competing directly with folks like Treasury or Ion or some of the aggregators out there? How do you see that going? Is it they remain niche, or is it that they're going to compete directly with some of the bigger players in the TMS or aggregator arena?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we think about filling the space, if there's a niche that is only covered by one area, not the other, they're completely complementary. There might be no overlap, but there's certainly issues where a niche player may go more deeply into an area, be more specialized for those that are complex in that particular space or offer a significant value. But to the extent that there's some overlap, there's going to be, it depends on how much the overlap is. If there's 85% overlap, they're very heavy competitors. But to the extent that it's a 30% overlap, a 10% overlap, and I'm just using percentages as a proxy for level of cover, then they would be considered complementary. Sure, Treasury Go managing accounts and doing FBAR would overlap, Treasury or Ion in some of those areas, but they also go extremely deep in how they manage and handle some of that activity. And so you could see some daylight between, let's say, other providers, depending on what the particular use case is. Same thing with clip money. There's some deposit networks that exist at banks. Those could be considered direct competitors or something that solves the problem in a very, very different way. Some of the security services like Trust Me, et cetera, that are provided. People involved or systems and solutions that are involved in the payment process try to add security features in for the purpose of protecting all their clients or making that as an option. They do that either by building it or by incorporating that type of functionality.
And one last thought around Treasury ecosystem, we've seen, over the years, the advancement of technology has been pretty rapid in recent years. It took a long time to get from hosted platforms to software as a service, which has lasted for quite a long time. Now we're seeing platform as a service, more nimble, Treasury as a service, such as the Treasury ecosystem. We have artificial intelligence and machine learning that's becoming a bigger part of fintech capabilities. As things continue to develop and advance, where do you see things going from here? Is Treasury ecosystem always going to be in play? Is it just morphs into what has been more of the standard, and we have a new layer that's added to the Treasury fintech arena? What do you see over the next, 3 to 5, maybe 10 years out? How do you see things playing out?
Yeah, so 2 guiding thoughts on that. One, what we've seen in the past will be an indicator of what happens in the future. And 2, there's some changes that will alter how the past has played out from what we expect to see in the future. What we've seen in the past is new providers and innovation comes about. That gets incorporated into bank products. That gets incorporated into some of the core system solution sets. They add those capabilities. The one system or the bank provides a greater level of those capabilities, so they'll always be absorbing. And we've also always seen there's new development that takes place, the innovation that fills in other gaps that may have always existed or gaps that may emerge because of changes in the space, technology, risk, fraud, security, all those features. So we're going to continue to see that type of functionality be pulled into some of the core systems, that inexorable, not black hole, but the desire to add that functionality will continue. A couple other things that are changing. One would make me say yes, and one would make me say no to your question about, are we going to see new players enter and what will happen from a speed perspective? The new tech means that development is faster. That level of innovation will be able to create solutions that fill in more of the gaps, more of the holes, more rapidly, in a more affordable manner. So I don't want to use the term democratization of innovation, but there's certainly more capabilities that will be possible in that environment. That's the one side. The other side is this faster development. When we look at platform as a service and some of those tools, we know that development tends to run 5 to 8 times faster. And so that means development is more rapid. And so some of the niche players are able to use that type of technology and develop more rapidly. Some of the core dedicated players, as they use that technology, will be able to increase their rate of development and their rate of integration. So there's a couple areas where speed will matter. That'll strengthen both some of the core players as well as these niche players in the ecosystem. So I think they balance out over time, innovation and the desire to move to a single system. But the other factor, of course, is ease of integration. It doesn't always have to be in the same system if you have providers who are specialized that can integrate extremely well. So that will help us significantly. So those are some of the mindsets that we need to look at as we look forward.
Yeah, it's a lot of food for thought, Craig. Certainly a lot of activity going on out there. It'll be really interesting to see how things play out over the next 5+ years as technology advances and organizations move to fill gaps and needs that are out there. Anything else before we close out in terms of questions that I haven't asked? I just want to, if there's something else we should cover that we haven't.
The only thing that I would say, it's not related to questions you asked or didn't ask. This is one of the most interesting aspects of the analyst report, and capturing and seeing information that's developing, seeing capabilities that are emerging. And some of these are, if we look at the ecosystem or if we look at aggregators or treasury management systems, et cetera, we see impacts based on the external threat. And so that's having an influence. We see impacts based upon the technology that's being used, that's faster, easier to develop, and easier to integrate. And then the other is we are seeing and experiencing this growth of the power of networks, using networks for payments, networks for information and validation, networks that allow us to even deposit cash, leveraging the power of the network. What can you do on the network? How big is the network? Those are all having a significant influence. And so, better integration, the power of networks, those are influencing the entire Treasury technology space, not just the ecosystem or any of the other particular areas.
Well, Craig, thank you for your time today. Appreciate the conversation. Certainly a real fascinating area of fintech and treasury. Hope people get a chance to take a look at what we have in the analyst report. As a reminder, you can download a copy of the analyst report by going to the show notes, clicking on the link, or you can go to our website and download directly from there. Once again, Craig, thanks for your time and look forward to our next podcast conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.